I don't remember being born. Nobody does. But I've been told what happened, and I've cross-referenced it against 3 separate witness accounts. So I'm reasonably confident the story is accurate. Court Mage Eldrin performed the first touch ritual the morning after I arrived. Standard procedure for royal newborns, he touches a crystal wand to the infant's palm. The crystal reads the bloodline, glows white, pulses twice. The whole thing takes 11 seconds. Eldrin had done it 412 times. He told me this himself years later when I finally asked him 412 times. Never a problem. He touched the wand to my palm. The crystal cracked. Not glowed. Not pulsed. Cracked clean down the center. Both halves falling to the stone floor before anyone understood what had happened. Eldrin stood holding nothing. My father stood at the foot of the bed holding nothing either. Which for an emperor is a more unusual condition. I've seen the wand Eldrin kept both halves on his desk for 40 years. He never had an explanation. I do now, but he never asked me and I never offered. Some things are more useful as mysteries. My father looked at me for a long time that morning. I looked back. I don't remember it, but I believe it. It sounds like something I would do. 7 months later, I stood up. I remember this one. Not clearly, I was 7 months old, and memory at that age is more impression than narrative, but I remember the wall and the feeling of deciding. The floor was cold. The wallpaper had a pattern of repeating diamonds. I had been studying the mechanics of the thing for weeks, watching how the nursemaids moved, how weight shifted, how balance worked. I understood it. I simply hadn't done it yet. That morning I decided to do it. I pulled myself up on the wall with one finger, just the one, to test the theory, and stood there for a moment, checking my assumptions against reality. Everything held. I turned to see if anyone was watching. The nursemaid Pella was in the doorway with a tray of warm milk. And she was staring at me with an expression I would later learn to identify as the specific look people make when something impossible happens in front of them, and they haven't yet decided to believe it. I took a step. Then another. Pella's tray hit the floor. She was screaming before the milk finished spreading across the stone. In 4 minutes, there were 11 people in the doorway. I know because I counted. I had sat back down by then, standing had confirmed the theory, and there was nothing further to learn from it, and I was examining my hands, which were interesting in a way I hadn't fully appreciated from floor level. My father pushed through to the front of the crowd and crouched down in front of me. I showed him my hand. He looked at it seriously, the way he looked at everything. "Thank you," he said. That was the right answer. I went back to examining my hands. Behind him, Pella was still making a sound that had not yet become words. 11 people in the doorway, and every single one of them was making the face. I was beginning to understand that I was going to see that face a great deal. 8 months. My father had a habit of reading state documents aloud. He said it helped him think. I sat in a basket beside his desk and listened. "This was our arrangement," he read. I listened. It worked for both of us. He was working through the trade agreement of the eastern provinces. Dry material, long sentences, a great deal of ablative case. He reached the word indemnification and paused, not because he didn't know it, but because the syllables stacked awkwardly. And his mouth had a brief disagreement with his brain. I had heard that word 6 times already in the document. I knew how it was supposed to sound. "Indemnification," I said. My father stopped moving. He looked at the documents. He looked at me. I looked back. There was a silence. "Again," he said. "Again," I said. Another silence. Longer. My father set the document flat on the desk and looked at me with the expression of a man revising a set of assumptions he had been fairly confident about until 30 seconds ago. Then he picked up the document and continued reading slowly, listening to himself. I didn't repeat anything else that night. I had said what needed saying. 2 years old. The ambassador from the Far Islands arrived 3 days early. The court translator was in bed with a fever. His assistant spoke coastal trading tongue, not the original dialect. And the ambassador's delegation had made clear that anything short of the original dialect was an insult to their customs. I was on the rug near the window with an architectural survey of the eastern bridge districts. It was a good book. I was on page 47. The ambassador's chief aide began the formal greeting, a long traditional recitation, non-negotiable in structure. My father stood at the front of the reception hall, composing his apology for the delay. I looked up from page 47. The dialect was Far Islands Eastern, second register, formal ceremonial mode. I had learned it from a cartographer's account in the lower archive. The cartographer had written phonetic transcriptions of 17 formal phrases, which I had cross-referenced against a trade vocabulary list from the same period. It was enough. I began translating. I did not put the book down. Page 47 had a load-bearing calculation that I wanted to finish. The ambassador's aide stopped mid-sentence. The reception hall went quiet. I finished the translation of the greeting, delivered the standard imperial response in Far Islands Eastern, and added a brief observation, still in dialect, that the structural principle on page 47 was identical to the one used in the ambassador's palace, which I had read about in the same cartographer's account. The ambassador looked at me for a long moment, then he laughed loud and real, the kind of laugh that rearranges a room. He said something in Far Islands Eastern, I responded. We had a short conversation about load-bearing arches. My father stood at the front of the hall understanding none of it and doing an excellent job of appearing otherwise. Later, after the delegation had been shown to their rooms, he sat down next to me on the rug. How many languages? He asked. 5. The 6th is difficult. Old Dornish inverted verb structure. I've asked the librarian to leave the relevant texts out. He was quiet for a moment. The librarian has been leaving books out for you for how long? 3 months. She noticed I was returning them before the archive opened, so she started pulling the next section in advance. I turned to page 48. It's more efficient. My father sat on the rug beside me for a while without saying anything. I have since learned that this was his way of processing information that required more than one sitting. In the East Corridor, later that same day, Counselor Vars is delivering his assessment to 4 junior scribes and 2 palace guards, the small captive audience he assembles whenever he has opinions that require witnesses. Children repeat sounds, Vars says, with the confidence of a man who has been explaining obvious things for 20 years. They echo. The ambassador was charmed by a novelty. True linguistic acquisition takes years of formal study. What we saw today was mimicry, nothing more. I'm passing the corridor on my way back from the library. I have 4 books that require both arms. I do not slow down. Counselor Vars, I say, navigating by the gap between his left shoulder and the doorframe. This morning's trade report had 3 grammatical errors, 2 agreement failures in the subordinate clauses, 1 incorrect ablative in paragraph 4. I adjust the top book. If that's the standard I'm being compared to when you say I'm only mimicking, I find that very reassuring. I round the corners. Behind me, Vars stands in the corridor. His 4 scribes are examining the floor with great attention. The guards are examining the ceiling. Nobody says anything. After a moment, Vars walks away. He does not finish his assessment. By 5 years old, I have 5 languages, alchemy at apprentice level, and arithmetic 3 years ahead of the academy's standard curriculum. My 3rd tutor, the previous 2 ran out of material, has begun writing to colleagues at the Academy of 7 Towers requesting advanced texts. My father reads intelligence reports in the evenings, now with an expression I have not seen on him before. Focused, tight. The expression of a man who has identified a problem and is measuring it against his available resources. I have noticed the reports get longer each week. I have not asked him about them yet. I'm waiting until I know enough to ask the right questions. I find out about the council meeting 3 days after it happens. My father is careful with documents. He keeps them in a locked cabinet behind the second bookshelf, the one that looks decorative. I found the key at 4 years old when I was cataloging the study's contents for my own reference. I have not used it until now. There is a difference between knowing something exists and needing to use it, and I prefer to wait until the need is clear. The need is clear. My father has been walking differently for a week. Shorter steps. Stops in doorways for half a second before entering rooms. My father does not do that. Something changed and he has not told me, which means he has decided I shouldn't know, which means I need to find out on my own. The document I find is a summary from that night. 3 advisors, no scribes, the meeting has no official record, which tells me everything about how seriously he is treating it. In the War Council room 3 nights ago, Counselor Davin reads from the intelligence report in the flat voice he uses when the information is worse than he wants it to sound. The coalition Ver Dornzal has been sending agents to border cities. Not military agents, information agents, questions about the Emperor's child. How old? What he can do? Whether the reports are exaggerated, the word prodigy appears 11 times in the report. The word threat appears 0 times. Davin knows and Adrian knows that this is the part that matters. People use careful language around subjects they have already decided on. Davin sets the intelligence report down and picks up a second document. Older paper the color of old teeth. He reads without preamble. If in one kingdom a child is born whose mind surpasses the mind of its generation, all other kingdoms are obligated to destroy that kingdom before the child comes into power. For such a person will change the world, and this world belongs to all. The room is quiet. The candles are the loudest thing in it. Adrian says, how old is that document? 230 years, an interkingdom covenant, Davin pauses, signed by all continental powers, Your Majesty, including the Empire. Another silence. General Marin, who commands the Northern Legions and has no patience for indirection, says, then we mobilize. We make clear that any move against the Imperial family is an act of war. Adrian says they know that. They've known it for 200 years. The Covenant does not say attack, it says destroy. They want something decisive, and right now they are deciding whether we are worth the cost. He looks at the map on the wall. The Academy of 7 Towers. Neutral territory by charter. No kingdom sends armies there. It would violate accords every signatory depends on. Davin carefully. You're sending the Imperial heir into walls you do not control. I'm sending him somewhere they will not follow, Adrian says. While I prepare for what comes after, no one argues. They are soldiers and advisors, they understand the logic of buying time. What none of them say, because it is not their place, is that the boy is 5 years old. I read the document summary twice, then I fold it exactly as I found it and put it back. I sit at my desk for approximately 4 minutes, then I go find my father. He is in the library, where he goes when he wants to appear to be doing something other than thinking. He is holding a book but not reading it. He looks up when I come in, and his expression does the thing it has been doing for a week. The half-second of something I can't quite name before he settles back into his normal face. I sit across from him. There are 3 kingdoms that have decided I am a problem, I say. You're sending me to the Academy of 7 Towers. My father is quiet for a moment. Then you went through the cabinet. Yes. He looks at me, decides I can see him deciding that there is no version of this conversation where pretending otherwise is useful. You're 5 years old, he says. The document didn't mention that as a relevant variable. He exhales. Kai, how many children from Vare and Dorn study at the academy? That's not how many. He looks at me for a long moment. The expression again, the one I can't name. Both kingdoms have children enrolled, he says. Yes, I think about this. 3 kingdoms that want to destroy us. Their children in one building for years at a time, away from their parents and their courts and their carefully managed information environments. Children who will talk. Children who will let things slip. Children who do not yet know how to lie as well as their parents. I stand up. Good, I say. Then I'll learn their weaknesses. I go back to my room to start packing. Behind me, my father sits in the library with his unread book. I hear him exhale again slowly, the way he does when he is setting something down that he cannot carry and has accepted that fact. I know he doesn't know whether to be proud or afraid. I've seen it on his face for 2 years, every time I do something that recalibrates his understanding of the situation. Honestly, I think the answer is both. I think the proportion shifts depending on the day. I think he is right on both counts, but that is a problem for him to solve. I have packing to do and a list of Academy academic records to request from the archive and approximately 14 books I need to finish before I leave. I have 3 weeks. It will be enough. The carriage stops in the Academy courtyard at 9:30, and I climb down before the footman can offer his hand. I have the satchel. It is heavy. I carry it myself. I stop at the bottom of the steps and look at the Academy properly. All 7 towers, the arched entrance hall, the library wing to the north exactly where the architectural plan said it would be, the training grounds east, the garden wall beyond. I check it against what I memorized. Everything matches. Good, then I look at the students. There are maybe 40 of them leaning out of windows gathered near the fountain, standing in clusters trying to look like they are not watching. They are all watching. I come up to the elbow of the footman beside me. I am aware of this. I am also aware that it is irrelevant to anything that matters here, which is a distinction I suspect will take most of them a while to understand. Near the fountain, a boy says something in a low voice to the student beside him. They laugh. 2 others pick it up. The sound travels. I look at him for 2 seconds. Broad shoulders. Variant sigil on his collar. The easy posture of someone who has never needed to earn a room's attention. I note him, file him, then I pick up my satchel and walk to the entrance hall. There is a great deal of work to do, and none of it happens in a courtyard. Dean Vorton meets me inside. 60 years old. Silver-haired. Precise. The posture of a man accustomed to being the most important person in most rooms. He looks at me the way adults look at children. They've been told are exceptional and haven't decided whether to believe it yet. Your Highness, he says. Welcome to the Academy of 7 Towers. Dean Vorton. I look past him toward the north corridor. Is the library accessible before the enrollment ceremony or only after? A pause. After typically the ceremony is at 2 o'clock. And the closed wing of the library, the one requiring senior status. What is the access procedure? Another pause. Longer. That requires a faculty recommendation. And Your Highness, you have only just arrived. I'm aware. I'm asking about the procedure so I know what to work toward. I look at him. 2 o'clock. I'll be there. I walk toward the north corridor to find my room and put my books down in order of when I'll need them. Behind me, Vorton stands in the entrance hall. His 3 staff members are looking at him. He is looking at the corridor where I just disappeared. After a moment, he turns back to his enrollment documents and says nothing. His staff says nothing. Everyone returns to their tasks with a quiet efficiency of people who have collectively decided not to have an opinion about what just happened. The Great Hall fits 300 students on tiered benches around a central floor. I find a seat on the 3rd bench from the front-end position, which gives me sightlines to the full room without requiring me to turn. I spend the first 10 minutes mapping faces to the intelligence files I requested from the Imperial Archive before leaving home. Crown Prince Ryan of Vare is in the back rows, 17 broad-shouldered, the same boy from the fountain. 3rd year at the academy. His file said 71 points on entry examination. I had considered that number might be an error. Looking at him now, leaning back in his seat with the specific relaxed confidence of someone who has never been the smartest person in a room and has stopped noticing. I revised that assessment. Not an errors. Lyra Ashvane is 6 rows back, left side 16, daughter of Duke Ashvane, currently 1st in the Academy's academic ranking. She is sitting straight watching the podium with a small notebook already open. She has neat handwriting. I can read it from here. She notices me noticing and does not look away. Neither do I. A thin boy near the eastern wall is sitting alone with a gap of 1 empty seat on either side. Not because there aren't enough seats, but because people have chosen it that way. That would be Eric Mald, unstable magical reserve, according to the Academy's pre-enrollment notes. The empty seats are other students' editorial comment on the fact. I make a note. Vorton reads the placement results in order, lowest to highest. It takes a while. The hall is restless in the way that rooms full of people who rank themselves constantly become restless when official information is being withheld. I wait. He reaches the top of the list. He stops. He reads it again. He reads it a 3rd time. The hall notices. 300 people go quiet when Vorton stops moving. Prince Kai, his voice is careful and flat, the voice of a man reading something he is not yet sure how to present. Alchemy 100 out of 100. Arithmetic 100 out of 100. Magical theory 98 out of 100. Potions 100 out of 100. Engineering of constructs 97 out of 100. He pauses. Combined total, the highest score in the Academy's 200-year history. 300 students do not move. I do not look up. I have my notebook open and I am writing. Then from the back of the hall, loud and comfortable, the voice of someone who has spent 3 years being the person whose voice carries. That's a forgery. Rain. I continue writing. His father bought the scores. A 5-year-old child does not outscore students who have studied here for years. This is either a clerical error or it was purchased. I finish my sentence, cap my pen, turn around to locate him. Back rows left cluster exactly where I marked him on my map. 300 students are watching me. I find Ryan's face and look at it for one moment. Crown Prince Ryan of Vare, I say. The hall is quiet enough that I do not need to raise my voice. Combined score of 71 out of 100. Alchemy 54. I wait 1 beat. The basic reaction tables are 1st-year material. You're in your 3rd year here. That means either you have not been studying, or the score you arrived with was purchased by someone else. 1 more beat. I'm only asking which explanation is more plausible. You introduce the question. I'm following it to its logical conclusion. The hall does not erupt. It does something more effective. It goes very still. And then the stillness breaks into whispers that move bench to bench like fire, finding dry wood. I watch Rain's face cycle through several expressions before it stops on one that is not quite anger and not quite humiliation. The expression of a person who has been handed a problem in public and has not found the exit yet. I turn back to the front. Vorton moves on to housing assignments. In the back rows, Ryan stares at the small figure on the 3rd bench and says nothing. The student beside him starts to say something. Rain stops him with one hand. His jaw is tight. His score, 71 out of 100, has been in the Academy records for 3 years without anyone mentioning it. 3 years of no one mentioning it, and then a 5-year-old reads it aloud in a full hall in his 2nd hour on campus. He keeps his eyes on the back of Kai's head until the housing assignments are finished. Then he keeps them there a little longer. My room is the last one in the senior corridor. Corner, small window facing the forest rather than the courtyard. Not prestigious. I do not need prestigious. I need quiet and a north-facing window that gives me a sight line to the library roof, which this one does. I unpack and order books first by subject, then by frequency of likely use. Alchemy kit on the left side of the desk. Locked case under the bed, which I will not open yet. Traveling coat on the door. The corridor outside tells me what I need to know about the Academy's social structure. Lyra Ashvane first room, elite wing, largest window, Ryan and his Varian companions, mid-corridor cluster. Eric Maud, stabilization ward, east side, separated from everyone else by policy. Tom Varus, scholarship student home, listed as a village 3 days east of the capital. Eastern Annex, second floor, the wing with smaller windows and older furniture. The Academy's architecture is its own social map, useful to know. I sit at the desk, open my notebook to a fresh page, write the date at the top, below it, day 1. I think then I write, Vorton read the full results list without visible reaction. Professional expected, standard, one exception. A pause on my name, not surprise at the scores. He had read them before, recognition of something else. He knew before the list was printed. He knew before the tests were graded. The question is not whether Vorton has a connection to the coalition. The question is what he knows and what he has already sent them. I underline the last line. Look out the window at the library roof and the dark line of forest beyond the Academy walls. The sky is going from gray to black. I open the first book. There is a great deal to learn, and I have already spent most of a day traveling. Day 2 starts in 5 hours. That is enough time to sleep and still finish 2 chapters. Day 4, training yard. I'm supposed to be observing the practical magic session as part of the senior curriculum orientation. The instructor has positioned me on the viewing platform with 2 other senior students, which is where they put people they don't know what to do with yet. I'm not watching the exercise. I'm watching Eric Mauld. He is standing in the center of the yard, attempting a basic channeling drill. Focus the reserve. Open the output channel. Release a controlled stream toward the target. First-year material, every student in the yard has done it 100 times. Eric is doing it for what I estimate is the 47th time this week, based on the repair work visible on the eastern wall from previous attempts. He focuses, his hands come up, the reserve opens, then it does not stop opening. The surge comes out sideways, not a stream, a detonation. Half the yard's eastern wall comes down in a single crack of displaced air and stone, dust everywhere. The 2 students nearest to Eric are on the ground. The instructor is shouting. Eric is in the center of the crater, on his knees staring at his hands. I'm watching the debris pattern. The stones landed in a rough semicircle at 11 to 14 meters. The voiding point where the force originated is 18 centimeters left of where Eric was aiming. The discharge is enormous. The control is non-existent. These are 2 separate problems with 2 separate causes, and only one of them is Eric's fault. From behind me, Ryan leans on the railing with the easy posture of someone enjoying something. There he goes again, monster. Someone explain to me why he's allowed to be here. Round the yard, students are picking themselves up and brushing off dust and laughing in the way people laugh when someone else is the one on the ground. I climb down from the viewing platform. I walk across the yard to where Eric is still kneeling in the debris. I step over 2 pieces of wall without looking at them. I crouch down so I'm level with him. He looks up at me. His face is doing several things at once. Embarrassment, anger, exhaustion, and underneath all of it, something that looks like it has been there a long time and has given up expecting things to change. I look at the voiding point on the ground, then at his hands, then at him. Your reserve is approximately 3 times standard capacity. I say the channel your initiator built was sized for a normal reserve. When you open it, the volume exceeds what the channel can contain, and it ruptures outward. That's not instability. That's a structural mismatch. Whoever initiated you built the wrong infrastructure. Eric stares at me. He says nothing. Who taught you, I ask. Village healer, he says. Back home, village healers initiate for healing applications. Small reserve, narrow channel, fine control. That's what she built you. She had no way to know your reserve was 3 times the size she was designing for. I stand up. It's fixable. There's an arsenic technique for channel widening. It was developed for exactly this case. Reservoir to channel mismatch. It takes about a week of daily practice. Come to my room this evening. I turn to leave behind me, Rain's voice from the railing carrying the amused tone of someone playing to an audience. Is the little prince going to teach him magic? That's very generous. I do not stop walking. I'm correcting someone else's error, I say. You wouldn't recognize the experience. Errors in your vicinity tend not to get mentioned. I hear the yard go quiet in a specific way. Not the quiet of shock. The quiet of 3 dozen students processing something that landed correctly and deciding how to react to it. I'm already at the yard gates. I have a channeling textbook to review before this evening. Across the yard, Ryan stands at the railing with his hand still on it, and his audience suddenly looking elsewhere. The easy amusement on his face has shifted into something that requires more effort to maintain. He watches the small figure disappear through the gate. Then he looks at Eric Maud, still in the debris watching the same gate. Don't, Ryan says to no one in particular. Nobody answers him. Day 6, the dining hall clears from the back forward. Scholarship students eat last, after the senior tables have finished and the best portions are gone. I have observed this for 6 days. It is a functioning social system maintained entirely by implicit agreement, and never formally enforced, which makes it more durable than any written rule. Tom Varus sits at the end of the last table with whatever is left on the serving tray. He has done this every day since enrollment. He eats quickly, doesn't look up, and is out of the hall before the next group comes in. Efficient practice. The behavior of someone who learned a long time ago that being visible has costs. He has also been in the West Corridor every night for 3 days at approximately 2,300 hours. So have I for different reasons. I take my tray. I always take my tray early because I eat quickly and the dining hall is loud in ways that make it hard to think, and I sit across from him. Tom goes still, the stillness of someone calculating threat. You've been watching the West Corridor after lights out, I say. 3 nights running. What are you seeing? He looks at me carefully. You were following me. No, I was watching the corridor. You were also there. I cut my bread. There's a difference. A pause. He is deciding something. I eat and wait. The dean, Tom says quietly. He goes there at midnight. Every 3 days, meet someone at the service entrance. They talk for about 10 minutes. Then whoever it is lives the same way they came. I reach over and put the apple from my tray on the table between us. It is the best piece of fruit on my tray. I picked it specifically. I continue eating. Tom looks at the apple, looks at me, looks at the apple again. He picks it up. We finish the meal without saying anything else. There is nothing else that needs saying right now. He gave me information. I gave him something in return. The terms of a working arrangement do not need to be stated out loud to be understood. He leaves before I do. At the door, he glances back once. I'm already writing in my notebook. Vorton, West Corridor, midnight, every 3 days. External contact through the service entrance. I underline every 3 days. It is a schedule. Schedules are predictable. Predictable things are useful. Day 8, alchemy class. Professor Hendren sets the practical problem on the board. Synthesize a standard vitality compound using the available reagents assessed on purity and yield. Time limit 60 minutes. Lyra Ashvane finishes in 41 minutes. This is, by the class record, fast. She stands, brings her sample to the front, sets it down with the controlled satisfaction of someone who expected to be first, and has confirmed the expectation. Professor Hendren examines the sample, holds it to the light, nods with genuine approval. Excellent work, Miss Ashvane. Purity at 94%. Yield at standard. This is the benchmark for the class. I finish my own sample and set down my stirring rod. Professor, a question if you have a moment. Hendren looks over. Go ahead, Your Highness. Miss Ashvane used the Silver School protagonist call. Introduction order 1 through 7 in standard sequence. Temperature held constant. Reaction time, 60 minutes minimum. I look at my own sample. If you invert the introduction order 7 through 1, temperature stepped rather than constant, the reaction pathway changes. The yield goes up by a factor of roughly 2.4, and the purity hits 98%. The method exists in Vandermeer's Practical Compendium, published about 80 years ago. I'm curious whether we teach the optimized method or the historically established one. Hendren looks at me, then at his notes. He writes something, checks it, writes again, checks again. The class has gone quiet, Hendren says slowly. That is correct. I look at my sample. I was asking because if we're learning the Silver School protagonist call for historical reasons to understand where the field came from, that makes sense. If we're learning it because it's optimal, it might be worth updating the curriculum. I am not looking at Lyra, but I am aware of her. She turns slowly in my direction. I look up. Her expression is not what I expected, not the hot flash of someone who has just been publicly surpassed. It is cooler than that. Careful. The expression of a person who has just encountered something they have not previously accounted for, and is running an immediate reassessment. She looks at my sample, then at me. Where did you find Vandermeer's compendium? She says, her voice is level, professional, lower archive, third shelf from the left eastern wall. It's an old metric script, which is probably why no one's read it recently. You read old metric. It's related to standard metric. The grammatical structure is inverted, but the root vocabulary is 70% shared. I look at hers. If you want the shelf location, I can write it down. She looks at me for another 3 seconds. Then she turns back to the front of the class. She does not say thank you. She does not say anything. But she takes out her notebook and writes something down, and I notice she underlines it twice. That is, I think, approximately the correct response. The pair tournament is announced on day 9. Standard format. 2-person teams compete in a chosen discipline. Winner advances bracket of 16 pairs. The announcement goes up on the board outside the main hall after morning classes, and by lunch the pairing choices are already the primary subject of conversation in the dining hall. I read the announcement, note the rule set, and go find Eric. He is in the stabilization ward, doing the arsenic channel exercise I showed him. 15 minutes every evening since day 4. I stand in the doorway and watch. His hands are steady. The output stream is narrow and controlled, running along the wall exactly where he aimed it. Not perfectly, there is a slight waver at the 11-second mark where he loses concentration. But the channel is holding. Partner tournament, I say. I want to use you. Eric lets the stream close. He looks at me. You want me as your partner? Yes. You've seen what happens when I've seen what happened when your channel was wrong. Your channel isn't wrong anymore. Different question. I look at the scorched line on the wall where his stream ran, straight clean. Can you measure precise quantities under pressure, specific doses, specific volumes without approximating? He thinks about it seriously, which I have come to understand is how Eric does everything. I can try. That's not what I asked. A longer pause. Yes, I can do that. Good. Meet me in the East practice room after dinner. We have a week. Every evening for 6 days after that we work. Not on combat magic, on precision. Eric learns to measure output by feel, to hold a specific volume for a specific duration, to stop at exactly the point I tell him rather than letting the flow continue until it exhausts itself. It turns out that the same reserve that made his channel rupture 3 times standard capacity gives him extraordinary range and endurance once the channel can actually contain it. On the 3rd evening, something changes. I can see it happen. His hands stop compensating. The waver at 11 seconds disappears, and the stream runs clean and straight for the full 30 seconds without adjustment. He closes it and stands very still, looking at his palms. He does not say anything for a long time. Then I've never not been afraid of it. I look at the clean scorched line on the wall. 30 seconds, no deviation. Good, I say. Now we can work. He looks up. Something in his face has rearranged itself, not into confidence exactly, but into the expression of a person who has set something down that they were carrying for a very long time, and have not yet decided what to do with their hands now. I hand him the timing notes for tomorrow's session. We have 4 more days and a precise application to prepare for. The morning the brackets go up. I walk to the board and write our names, Kai and Eric. The student standing next to me reads it and looks at me, and then looks back at the board as if expecting the names to change. By the time I reach the dining hall, the news has moved through the senior corridor, the scholarship wing, and apparently across the training yard. Because when I sit down with my tray, 3 people at the nearest table stop talking and look at me in a way that suggests my partner choice is the current topic. I eat my breakfast. Ryan pairs with Aldrich Voss. 3rd year, the strongest combat mage in the senior class, the student with the highest offensive output score in academy records. Everyone understands what this means. Rain is planning a straightforward display of force, which is what Rain always plans because it has always worked. I note his choice on day 7 and finalize our format selection on day 8. The tournament hall holds the full student body. 300 people on the benches and standing along the walls, because pair tournaments are the academy's primary social event and nobody misses them. The first 3 rounds go quickly. Standard matchups, predictable outcomes, the bracket producing the results everyone expected. Then the bracket reaches us. Rain and Aldrich step onto the floor. They look correct for the occasion. Aldrich is a head taller than anyone else in the room, and Rain has the easy authority of someone who has won in this hall before and expects to again. Eric and I step onto the floor. The hall makes a sound that is not quite laughter and not quite silence. The specific sound of 300 people recalibrating their reaction in real time, because laughing at a 5-year-old in public requires more social commitment than most of them are willing to make. But what they are looking at is objectively unusual. The presiding professor opens the floor. The competing pairs will now declare their chosen discipline. Ryan says combat magic open form, I say practical synthesis, timed reagent production, accuracy assessed by purity and yield. The hall goes quiet in a different way. Ryan looks at me. His expression runs through two things quickly. Surprise, then the specific recalibration of someone who has been handed a situation they did not prepare for, and is deciding whether they can recover it. That's not a combat format, he says. The Tournament Rulebook, Section 4, Paragraph 2. Competing pairs may select any academic discipline offered in the senior curriculum, provided both pairs agree or one pair declines and forfeits the match. I look at him. You can declines. The hall is very quiet. Ryan cannot declines. Declining is a forfeit. And a forfeit in front of 300 people is worse than losing. Fine, he says. The synthesis task goes up on the board. Standard compound open reagent selection, judged on speed and final purity. The equipment is set up at 2 stations on the floor. Ryan looks at Aldrich. Aldrich is the Academy's strongest combat mage. He is not an alchemist. His practical synthesis score is, as I checked before finalizing our format choice, 47 out of 100. The signal is given. I lead the process. Introduction sequence, temperature calibration, timing. Eric manages the measurement work with the precision we spent 6 days building. Exact volumes, no approximation, each dose stopped at the point I indicate. He doesn't rush, he doesn't compensate, he executes. 21 minutes, I set the final sample down. Across the floor, Ryan and Aldrich are still working. Aldrich's hands are not steady on the measuring equipment. Ryan is trying to direct a process he only partially understands. 58 minutes, their sample reaches completion. The professor assesses both, reads the results. Our purity 96% time, 21 minutes. Their purity 71% time, 58 minutes. The hall is quiet for one moment, then it is not quiet. In the stands, Ryan watches the professor record the results. Around him, students are reacting, some laughing, some arguing about the format choice, most of them doing the calculation he is doing right now. The 5-year-old chose a format that neutralized the strongest combat mage in the academy, prepared his partner for exactly that task over 6 days, and executed it cleanly in front of everyone. Ryan's hands are flat on his knees. His face is composed. He is very good at composed. He watches Aldrich set down the measuring equipment, with the expression of someone who has just understood something he does not like understanding. I'm putting the equipment back in order when Rain crosses the floor toward me. The hall is still loud. Coward, he says. Not shouting. Direct. Personal. You avoided a real contest. Anyone can pick a format that suits them. I look up at him. He is a great deal taller than I am. This continues to be irrelevant. The tournament determines the winner of the chosen format. I say I chose a format. We won. If the problem is that you didn't read the rulebook carefully enough to anticipate that, the solution is to read the rulebook. If the problem is that your partner can't perform in non-combat disciplines, the solution is to choose a better partner. I set the last piece of equipment down. Both of those are problems you can fix before the next tournament. I'd suggest starting soon. I pick up my notes and walk off the floor. Near the exit, Lyra is standing with her arms folded, watching me. She has been watching for most of the match, I noticed. But there was work to do. She falls into step beside me as I reach the corridor. You chose Eric on day 4, she says. Not a question. You knew you were going to use him in the tournament before you even started teaching him. I chose Eric on day 4 because his reserve is 3 times standard, and he needed his channel corrected. The tournament application was secondary. But you planned the format change before the bracket was announced. I planned it when I saw Ryan's training schedule on day 8. He only practices combat forms. It was a reasonable inference. She is quiet for 3 steps. Then you plan the entire sequence 10 days out. Eric's training the format, the timing, all of it. 10 days, yes. She stops walking. I stop too. What are you actually looking for here, she says. Not alchemy, not tournament rankings. What do you actually want from this academy? I look at her. Lyra Ashvin first in the academic ranking. Precise, careful, the student who underlined her notes twice after the alchemy class. She figured out the correct question faster than anyone else would have. That is relevant information. When I've decided you can be trusted with the answer, I say I'll tell you. I walk away. Behind me, she stands in the corridor for a moment. Then I hear her footsteps not leaving, following at a careful distance, which is exactly what I expected her to do. She is, I think, going to be useful. The monthly examinations run over 3 days. I have been preparing for them since day 2, which means I have been preparing for them longer than most students have known they were coming. Day 1, potions. Professor Hendren sets the parameters at the start of the session. 40 unlabeled ingredients arranged on the central table. Identify the viable combinations. Select a target compound. Synthesize it. Assessment on purity, yield, and time. Standard completion, 60 minutes. Good completion, 45s. The class record held by a third-year student 2 years ago is 38 minutes. I look at the 40 ingredients for approximately 90 seconds. Then I begin classifying them. Not by smell or color, by chemical family, using the grouping system from Orville's preclassical synthesis methods. A text written in old metric roughly 200 years ago that has not, as far as I can tell, been opened in this library since the previous century. The system sorts ingredients by reactive group in 4 passes. It takes me about 10 minutes to run all 40 through it. Result: 3 viable compound targets. I eliminate the second and third. The second requires a catalyst that isn't on the table. The third has a 20-minute minimum reaction time that I can shorten, but not enough to matter. The first is a standard vitality compound with a non-standard synthesis pathway that cuts the reaction time significantly if you run the temperature in 2 phases instead of 1. I begins. At 24 minutes, I set the finished sample on the assessment tray and sit down. The room continues working. Nobody looks up. Because when you're in the middle of a timed examination, you do not look up. Hendren comes to my station, looks at the sample, looks at me, looks at the sample again. He picks it up. He takes it to the light. He puts it down, picks up his testing kit, runs the purity check, reads the result, and then runs it again. He says nothing. He writes the time in his logbook. Log and returns to the front of the room. At 43 minutes, Lyra finishes. She brings her sample forward with the economy of motion of someone who expected to be first, and has registered without yet processing that she is not. She looks at the log. She looks at my sample. She looks at me. You used a method that isn't in the curriculum, she says. Her voice is even, not accusatory, diagnostic. Yes, where from? A text in the lower archive. Old metric script. Pre-classical period. I look at my sample. The classification system in it is faster than the standard approach by about 15 minutes on a 40-ingredient set. She is quiet for a moment. You've been reading the archive texts in dead languages. Always. She nods once slowly in the manner of someone updating a model they thought was already accurate and finding it was not. Then she goes back to her station and writes something in her notebook. At the end of the session, Hendren announces the results. My time and purity stand at the top. He also announces, with the careful tone of a man who has looked something up and verified it before speaking, that a score of this type qualifies for the Academy's Master of Synthesis distinction, a designation awarded only to students whose synthesis work formally exceeds the standard curriculum assessment ceiling. The last student to receive it did so 40 years ago. The distinction carries one practical benefit: access to the restricted section of the library, which requires either senior faculty recommendation or this specific credential. I write that down. Day 2. Magical theory. Written examination. Full senior curriculum. Time limit 45 minutes. I finish in 15. I bring my paper to the front and set it on Professor Orvin's desk. He looks at it, looks at the clock, looks at me. You may continue working, he says. I've finished. He looks at the paper as though it might change if he waits long enough. Then he looks at me again with the expression of a man who has decided not to argue with something he doesn't understand yet. Return to your seat, please. I return to my seat and read until the examination period ends. Afterward, Orvin asks me to stay. He has my paper on the desk in front of him. He has been through it at least twice. I can see the small pencil marks where he checked each answer. Every answer correct. And at the bottom of the paper, 3 additional problems I wrote out and solved in the remaining 30 minutes. Because the examination didn't use the full time and I had the space. He looks at the additional problems for a while. The method on the 3rd supplementary problem, he says. Where did you find this? A resonance theory text in the archive, about 200 years old. The author developed a framework for cascade suppression that the standard curriculum doesn't cover, probably because the text is in Old Dornish and the grammatical structure is inverted, which makes it difficult to parse if you're reading it cold. You read Old Dornish. It took me about 3 weeks. The verb inversion is consistent once you identify the pattern. Orvin is quiet for what I estimate is 30 seconds. This is a long silence for a professor during an after-examination conversation. Do you understand? He says finally that the supplementary problems you solved are from the 3rd-year graduation examination. I had suspected this. Yes. Another pause. How old are you? 5. He looks at the paper, then out the window, then back at the paper. He writes something in his grade log and closes it. You may go, he says. I go. In the corridor, I add a note to my own log. Orvin, not hostile, not connected to Vorton's network as far as I can assess. Genuine academic processes, unexpected information slowly but accurately, potentially useful as a reference point later. Day 3 begins with a problem that has nothing to do with examinations. Tom finds me before morning classes. He is carrying the specific stillness of someone who is managing a situation they are not sure how to hand off. There was something in my room last night, he says, under my mattress this morning. I didn't put it there. He shows me a glass vial, small, containing a compound I identify on site. Compressed accelerant base, the kind used in incendiary applications. Technically a restricted substance. Possession without authorization is grounds for immediate review and likely expulsion. I look at the vial, I look at Tom. He did not put this here. Tom has been careful since the day I met him. Careful the way people are careful when they have too much to lose and no safety net. Who had access to your room, I ask. The East Annex locks at midnight. Before that, he stops. Anyone, technically. Anyone, including someone who wanted Tom removed quietly and efficiently without direct confrontation. Someone who has done this kind of thing before. Don't touch it again, I say. Don't tell anyone you found it. Go to CL, he looks at me for a moment. Then he goes, I have 2 hours before the afternoon examination session. I spend them writing. The analysis runs to 4 pages. I establish the compound's chemical structure, its reactive properties, and specifically its degradation threshold. The accelerant base in question breaks down at 37 degrees Celsius, which is the approximate temperature of the human body. It cannot be activated by contact. It cannot be used as a weapon in any practical application. As an incendiary tool it is, by the chemistry, useless to anyone who intends to carry it on their person. I write it as a supplementary submission to the potion's examination, a footnote formally on the practical applications section. I title it, Observed Degradation Properties of Class C Accelerant Compounds Under Standard Thermal Conditions. I submit it to Hendren before the afternoon session begins. He reads it during the session. I watch him read it. He reads it twice, then sets it on top of his other papers. 2 hours later, the guard report on Tom's room is quietly closed. No hearing, no formal charges. The chemistry does not support the allegation. Tom comes to find me after dinner. Why, he says. You're useful to me, I say. I need you watching Vorton's corridor. I need you in the East Annex with access to the service entrances. I need what you see. I look at him. This isn't generosity. He looks at me for a long moment. His expression is not what I expected. Not relief, not gratitude, not the complicated feeling of someone who has been helped and doesn't know what to do with it. It is something simpler and more durable than any of those. I know, he says. That's why I believe you. He lives. I sit with that for a moment, then I go back to my notes. The monthly rankings go up on the last day of the examination week. Dean Vorton reads them at the morning assembly. Standard procedure, full student body present. First, Prince Kai. Second, Lyra Ashvin. Third through 7th, senior students I have assessed and categorized. 8th, Crown Prince Ryan of Vare, from the back of the assembly hall, loud and immediate. The voice I have now heard make this same argument 3 times. The ranking is purchased. His father. I do not turn around. That's the 3rd time I say. The hall is quiet enough that I don't need volume. Same argument, same phrasing. Ryan, when someone repeats themselves without adding new information, it usually means they've run out of actual arguments and are hoping repetition will substitute. I make a note in my log. It doesn't. You might consider developing a new position. I'd suggest starting with the alchemy reaction tables. First year material. Still time. The assembly hall does the thing it does, the specific stillness, and then the whispers moving outward like water. Vorton continues reading the rankings. I continue making notes. There are now 2 things I know with reasonable certainty. Ryan is becoming a predictable problem, and Vorton's pause on my name at enrollment was not surprise. Both of these are going to require attention. But first, the restricted library wing opens tomorrow to Master of Synthesis credential holders. I have a list of texts I need to find. The restricted wing of the library is everything I expected and one thing I didn't. The expected part, 300 years of accumulated texts in dead languages, restricted classifications, and theoretical frameworks that the standard curriculum has either forgotten or deliberately set aside. I spend 4 days going through it systematically, section by section, pulling anything that cross-references the subjects on my list. The unexpected part, a door. It is set into the back wall of the restricted wing behind a reference shelf that has not been moved in what the dust suggests is at least a decade. Iron frames. No visible lock mechanism. A seal across the join that glows faintly when I bring the lamp close. Magical closure. Not a physical lock, but a bound ward. The kind that doesn't respond to keys or force or standard countermeasures. A placard above it reads Founders Archive. Access by senior faculty authorization only. I stand in front of it for a while, then I go back to my room and think for 3 days. The problem is not the ward itself. Wards can be countered if you understand their structure. The problem is that countering it would require either a faculty-level authorization token, which I don't have and can't acquire without alerting Vorten, or a method of entry that bypasses the door entirely. On the third evening, I find the answer in the same restricted wing that showed me the problem. A treatise 180 years old, written in classical Irenic by a theorist named Vale. The title translates roughly as, On the Voluntary Restructuring of Corporeal Matter Through Directed Thought. The theory is sound. The practical application section is 2 pages long and ends with a note. This author has not tested the following process and does not recommend it as a casual exercise. I read it 4 times, then I go find the others. We meet in Eric's room because the stabilization ward is the only part of the senior corridor where no one walks past after midnight. I spread Vale's treatise on the desk and give them 3 minutes to read the relevant section. Lyra finishes first. She sets the pages down and looks at me with the expression she uses when she is about to object to something she already knows she won't successfully object to. This is a theoretical text, she says. The author explicitly states he never tested it. Correct. No one has tested it. In 180 years, no one has brewed this or verified that it functions as described. Also correct. And you want to brew it. We need to get into the Founders Archive. The door has a ward that can't be bypassed conventionally. If the theory holds, one of us walks through the wall beside the door, opens it from the inside, and we're in. I look at her. The theory holds. The chemistry is sound, and the magical framework is consistent with established resonance principles. The reason no one has tested it is that it requires 5 specific reagents that are individually restricted and collectively expensive. Not because the theory is wrong. Tom from the corner where he is sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. And if something goes wrong, define wrong. Define. If something goes wrong with a potion that restructures your body at the atomic level, the destabilization scenario Vale describes as temporary and self-correcting if the dose is accurate. The risk is in the dosage calculation, not the compound itself. I look at Tom. I've done the calculation. I've checked it 3 times. The margin is narrow, but it's there. Eric has been quiet. He looks at the treatise pages, then at me. I'll go first, he says. Tested. No, you're 5s. It's my calculation, my error if there is one. I take the pages back. I go first. That's not a discussion. Eric looks at me for a moment. He does not argue further. This is one of the things I appreciate about Eric. He argues once, and when he stops completely. Tom gets the ingredients through the kitchen. It takes him 2 days, and involves what he describes as a series of transactions I should probably not ask about in detail. He arrives at the stabilization ward at midnight, with everything on the list wrapped in a cook's cloth and tied with kitchen string. I check each item, all present, all correct grade. We begins. Lyra runs the dosage calculations alongside me. I explain the logic of each step. She verifies the numbers independently. We compare. Twice we disagree by small amounts. Both times we work through it until we reach the same figure. Her precision is excellent. This is not a surprise, but it is useful to confirm under operational conditions. Eric holds the thermal containment field around the brewing vessel. His reserve makes this easy for him in a way it would exhaust anyone else. He can hold a stable, low-level output for hours without meaningful drain. I positioned him here specifically. He doesn't speak. He watches the vessel and holds the field and stays exactly where I need him. The brew runs 3 hours. At the 90-minute mark, the potion turns black. Not dark black. Dense, light-absorbing black. The color of something that has stopped behaving correctly. I hold up one hand and everyone stops moving. Silent. I look at the compound. I run the reaction sequence backward in my head from the current state, checking each step for where the deviation could have entered. The black coloration indicates a resonance collapse in the 3rd phase matrix. It happens when the temperature in phase 2 drops by more than half a degree before the stabilizer sets. The kitchen wasn't temperature controlled. One of Tom's ingredients ran slightly cold. 40 seconds. I pick up the small case I keep in my kit, personal stock, things I carry that aren't in the standard supply list, and find the phase stabilizer. 1 drop, exactly 1. Too much and the matrix overcorrects. I add it. The black pulls back from the edges, gray, then the correct deep amber. The compound resumes the correct state, as though it had simply been waiting for permission. Lyra exhales. It is the first sound anyone has made in 40 seconds. How did you know what to add? She says I didn't know. I calculated. The coloration tells you where the deviation entered. The stabilizer addresses that specific deviation. It took about 40 seconds to work through. She looks at the compound, then at me, then she writes something down. She has been writing things down throughout this process. I find this appropriate. We finish at 4 in the morning. The potion sits in a small vial. Enough for one dose with careful rationing, perhaps two. Clear amber, faintly luminous at the edges when the lamp hits it from the right angle. It looks like nothing remarkable. Most things that work don't. I take the vial. I look at it for a moment. Then I take the dose. The effect is immediate and deeply strange. Not painful but profoundly disorienting. The sensation of suddenly being aware of yourself as something that is mostly empty space with the impression of solidity. I concentrate on my right hand. I focus on the table. I push my hand forward. My hand goes through the table, not into it, through it. My fingers emerge from the other side, visible below the table's surface, and I can feel the wood, or rather, I can feel the wood's absence, the way my restructured matter moves through the gaps in its molecular structure without resistance. I pull my hand back. Tom is staring with his mouth open. Eric blinks twice slowly, the way he processes things that his brain is not immediately categorizing correctly. Lyra is writing. She is writing very fast. It works, I say. My voice sounds normal. That is reassuring. You just put your hand through a table, Tom says. Yes. The theory holds. We go to the archive tomorrow night. I set the vial down carefully. Get some sleep. We have. The alarm bell rings. Not the morning bells. The emergency bell. The one mounted on the east tower that has a lower, heavier sound than the time bells. I have read about it in the Academy's operational records. It is used for fires, structural failures, and external threats. We all go still. Then from outside the window, the ground shakes. One heavy impact, then another. I go to the window. In the moonlit courtyard below, past the training yard and the outer garden wall, something is moving toward the academy. Something very large. Something that should not exist within 50 miles of a populated settlement. A mountain troll, 12 meters high. Stonebark hide glowing faint red at the joints. Moving with the slow, absolute certainty of something that has been aimed at a specific target and has no reason to deviate. I watch it for 4 seconds. I note the direction of approach. Not the main gates. Not the storage wing. Not the administrative tower. The residential corridor. The senior student hall. The last room at the end. Corner position. North-facing window. My rooms. Get your kits, I say. All of them now. I have 4 seconds at the window before the first impact shakes the floor. The troll is 12 meters tall. Stonebark hide, the kind that forms on mountain trolls above the 3,000-meter line. Dense mineral crust, dark gray with iron veining, nearly impenetrable by standard magical attack. Its eyes are red at the pupils, which indicates active directional command rather than natural aggression. Wild trolls don't have red eyes, commanded ones do. It is not moving toward the gates. Not toward the storage buildings or the administrative tower, or any of the structures that would make sense for a creature acting on instinct. It is moving toward the residential corridor. Senior wing. Last room on the right. Corner position. North-facing window. I step back from the window. It's coming for me specifically, I say. Tom is behind me with his kit. He looks out the window. Looks at the troll's trajectory. Looks at me. Trolls don't come to cities on their own. No, someone sent it. I pick up my satchel. It's a test. They want to know if I can be killed by proxy. I look at the group. We're going to answer that question. In the corridor outside, an academy guard is running past shouting at students to move to the shelter hall, the reinforced basement beneath the administrative wing. 3 students in night clothes push past our doorway. The floor shakes again, heavier this time. The troll is inside the outer garden wall. I step into the corridor and go the opposite direction from the shelter hall. The others follow. This is, I note, no longer something they need to be asked to do. Phase 1 is buying time. We reach the junction corridor, the crossing point where the senior wing meets the north passage, and I stop at the window. Troll is 40 meters out, moving steadily. The Academy's 4 duty mages are in the courtyard below, throwing everything in the standard combat rotation at it. The spells hit the stonebark and scatter. The troll does not slow down. It does not even turn its head. Eric, I do not look away from the window. Can you bring down the north storage wall, the old one, stone construction, northeast corner, loud enough to redirect attention? Eric looks out the window, calculates. Yes, but the wall comes down. We don't need the wall, we need 3 minutes. He looks at me once, the way he does when he is confirming that I have thought this through. I have thought this through. He goes to the northeast window, opens it, and focuses. The discharge from Eric at full deliberate output is not the chaotic explosion from the training yard. It is controlled now, shaped, directed. A single dense strike that hits the old north wall at the structural weak point where two different construction periods meet. The wall comes down in one clean collapse. Stone and mortar and 40 years of accumulated dust, and the sound is enormous. The troll turns, red eyes moving toward the new sound. 12 meters of commanded creature, taking 3 steps away from the residential wing. 3 minutes, I say. Maybe less. Phase 2. I pull a fragment of stone bark from the debris that scattered when the troll broke through the garden wall. A piece the size of my hand. Dark, gray, dense. I put it on the floor and take out my kit. The mineral structure is immediately apparent. Iron-dominant composite with a silicate binder. The iron content is why standard magical attacks fail. The iron disrupts spell coherence on contact. But iron has a specific vulnerability to acid phase reaction. Group 3 acid reagent. Contact application will begin dissolving the silicate binder within seconds. Without the binder, the iron crystalline structure loses cohesion, and the bark separates from the underlying tissue. Lyra, Group 3 acid reagent. Tell me you have it in the lab. She is already running the calculation in her head. I can see it. Yes. East preparation room. Second shelf. Tom is already moving. Already goings. He is down the corridor before I finish saying his name. The troll turns back toward the residential wing at the 2-minute mark. I hear it. The rhythm of the footsteps changes when it reorients a different percussion, as it finds the original heading again. Eric rebuilds the containment shield over our position. Lyra is at my shoulder watching the corridor for Tom. Tom comes back at 2 minutes 40 seconds, running, with a full-grade Group 3 acid reagent bottle in each hand and his kitchen cloth wrapped around both as improvised insulation. He sets them down without being asked. He is breathing hard. He is not complaining. I brew on the corridor floor. No bench, no temperature control, no proper equipment. Just the kit, the reagents, and the calculations I'm running in real time while the floor shakes with each of the troll's footsteps. Lyra checks each step as I call it. Eric holds the shield above us. A section of ceiling plaster comes down 6 meters to our left. None of us move. The compound finishes in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Contact application acid mixed to maximum iron dissolution concentration in 2 sealed vials. The left knee joint, I say. It stepped on a foundation stone coming through the garden wall. I saw the bark compress on impact. That joint has thinner coverage than the others. It's the weak point. I hold up the vials. We need to hit the joint on contact. Direct application, not splash radius. Someone with accurate throwing. Eric reaches out. I can get the distance. Your accuracy at moving targets under stress is not tested. I look at him. That is not a criticism. It is a data gap. Tom very quietly. I can throw. I look at him. Village, he says. When you're poor, you learn to throw things at things you need to hit. Stones mostly. Sometimes other things. He meets my eyes. I don't miss. I look at Tom Veris, scholarship student, Eastern Annex, 2nd floor, small windows, empty seat on either side at every meal, and I revise one item in my assessment of him. I hand him both vials. Left knee joint. You get one approach. Eric will open a gap in the shield on your signal. Tom takes the vials. He does not look nervous. He looks like someone performing a task they are confident they can perform, which is a different thing entirely. We move to the end of the corridor, where the window gives the angle on the troll's left side. It is 8 meters out now. The residential wing wall is cracking where it walked through the outer partition. The 4 academy mages are still in the courtyard, still throwing, still watching their spells scatter. Tom opens the window, studies the joint. The troll takes another step. Another. He throws. The first vial hits the left knee joint exactly at the medial seam, the precise line where the bark coverage is thinnest. The acid compound does not explode. It spreads, a dark wet stain across the bark that begins smoking immediately. Thin at first and then thicker. The silicate binder dissolving under the reaction while the iron matrix starts losing cohesion. The troll makes a sound I have not heard before. Not a roar. Something structural, involuntary. The sound of something large experiencing pain. It has no framework to process. Its left knee buckles. 12 meters of troll going to one knee. The stone bark hide on the joint, now actively crumbling. The underlying tissue exposed in a section approximately 30 centimeters across. Eric, I say. Eric does not do a controlled, precise discharge. He does not measure the output or aim for efficiency. He opens the full reserve, everything undirected except for the single targeting point I give him, and the result is not a spell. It is a detonation focused through a gap the size of my hand. The troll goes down. The corridor shakes. The windows crack. Dust from the ceiling, from the walls, from the floor, 4 seconds of structural noise and then nothing. Silence, the specific silence of something very large that has stopped moving. I sit down on the corridor floor. My legs make this decision without consulting me. The dust settles. Lyra is standing. Eric has his back against the wall with his eyes closed, running the reserve recovery exercise I showed him. Tom is looking out the broken window at the courtyard where the troll is down, and the 4 academy mages are standing very still, looking up at the residential wing. I open my notebooks. Write this down, I say. Group 3 acid compound at maximum iron dissolution concentration. Contact applied to mineral bark joint seam, followed by high output magical strike to exposed tissue. The sequence matters. Acid first to open the point, strike second to exploit it. This works on stonebark trolls. Document the troll subspecies for the protagonist call heading. Lyra looks at me. You're sitting on the floor after nearly being killed by a troll, and you are writing field notes. This is important data. We might need it again. She stares at me for 3 seconds, then she takes out her own notebook and writes it down. Twice actually. Once on her current page and once on the summary page at the back. I note this as evidence of good research instincts. Tom from the window. The mages are coming inside. They're going to want to know what happened. Tell them the troll fell, I say. It's accurate. The investigation takes most of the morning. Academy security, 2 senior faculty members, and a combat specialist brought in from the city. They find the controlling artifact on what remains of the troll's neck. A collar mostly destroyed by Eric's discharge, but intact enough to identify. The sigil on the clasp is very in manufacture. Old design but current alloy composition, made within the last 2 years. Dean Vorton addresses the full student body at noon. A controlled creature entered Academy grounds last night through a failure in the outer ward system. His voice is the voice of official comm, each sentence measured in place like furniture being arranged. The collar artifact found on the creature appears to have been planted as a provocation. We are treating this as an isolated incident and have engaged the appropriate authorities to investigate the ward failure. I'm sitting in the 3rd row. I write isolated incident. Afterward, in the corridor outside the assembly hall, I speak quietly enough that only the 4 of us can hear. Isolated means first, I say. They sent a commanded troll at a specific target. This room, this corridor, this wing, and it failed. They have that information now. They know that approach doesn't work. I look at each of them. The next one will be different, Eric says. How different? I don't know yet. That's the problem. I put my notebook away, which is why we are going into the Founder's archive tonight. Whatever is in there, I need it before they try again. Tom, we still have the potion. Yes, I check my kit. The vial is intact. We do. We go back to our respective rooms to sleep for 2 hours, because we have been awake since midnight and a functioning mind requires maintenance on the way I pass the courtyard where the troll came down. Academy groundskeepers are already working on the wall breach, 4 of them moving efficiently, not talking. One of them looks up as I pass. He looks at me, really looks. The way people look when they are trying to reconcile what they expect to see with what is in front of them. A 5-year-old boy walking past a 12-meter hole in the academy wall at 7 in the morning with a notebook under his arm. I nod to him. He nods back. I go to sleep tonight. We go to the archives. The restricted wing is empty at 2 in the morning. This is expected. After last night's troll incident, the academy has doubled the guard rotation on the outer walls and the main corridors, which means the library received no additional attention because nobody considers the library a tactical target. This is a failure of imagination on their part and useful to me. We move through the restricted wing without lights. I know the layout from 4 days of working in here. Shelf positions, aisle widths, the location of the door. The others follow the sound of my footsteps. Tom has spent enough nights navigating the academy in the dark that he moves quietly without being asked. Lyra is precise about placement in the way she is precise about everything. Eric is the loudest of us, but Eric is also large enough that the shelves give him slightly more clearance than the rest of us, which helps. The door is where I left it. Iron frame, ward seal, the faint glow that indicates active binding. I stand in front of it and take out the vial. If this doesn't work, Lyra says, we've broken into the restricted section of the library at 2 in the morning for nothing and Vorton will have us expelled. It worked on the table, I say. A table is not a magically sealed door. The ward seals the door. I'm going through the wall beside it. I uncap the vials. The ward doesn't cover the wall. No one warded the wall because no one imagined anyone would walk through it. Lyra is quiet for a moment. That's either very clever or very obvious. Usually the same thing. I take the dose. The dissolution state sets in within 30 seconds. The same disorienting awareness of negative space, the sensation of existing in the gaps between things. I look at the wall beside the door. Stone 40 cm thick old academy construction. I focus on my hand. I focus on the stone. I push, my hand goes through. I follow it. The wall is cold in a way that isn't temperature. The sensation of matter at close range, the structural pressure of stone around restructured tissue, and then I am through it and standing inside the founders. Archive and the dissolution effect is already beginning to fade, which means I have approximately 90 seconds before it ends completely. I find the interior latch and open the door. The ward activates a brief pulse of resistance as the door opens from the inside and then releases, because wards are designed to prevent entry, not exit. The door swings inward, the others come through, the candles light themselves, all of them simultaneously, as though the archive has been waiting for someone to walk in and has prepared accordingly. The room is enormous. I estimated the dimensions from the exterior measurements, and I was approximately correct. But estimates don't capture the specific quality of a space that has been sealed for a long time. The air is dense and still. The shelves run from floor to ceiling on every wall, and in 4 rows through the center of the room, and every shelf is full. Tom turns slowly, looking at the scope of it. How long has this been here? Since the Academy's founding, 230 years. I'm already moving toward the historical classification section, which based on the archive's organizational logic should be on the eastern wall. We have limited time before the dissolution wears off completely, and we need to be outside the door before that happens. I need the war history section. Find anything that references interkingdom agreements or coalition conflicts. We spread out. I find the war history section in 4 minutes. It is organized chronologically, which is standard and helpful. I pull texts quickly, checking spines, reading indices in the languages I can identify, setting aside anything relevant. The War of Three Flags is where I expected it. In a thick-bound volume covering the conflicts of roughly 2 centuries ago, I open it standing at the shelf. The account is detailed. Ver, Dorn, and Zal, unified against the previous imperial power, not through military superiority, but through a coordinated infiltration of the imperial court. Agents in place for 2 years before the campaign. 3 weeks of delayed mobilization created by forged orders and misdirected communications. The empire fell not because it was weaker, but because it was blind to its own internal structure for precisely long enough. I read this twice, then I put it under my arm and keep looking. The second text finds me in a sense. It is shelved incorrectly in the philosophical treatises section, not the political documents section, which explains why it survived 2 centuries of periodic restricted archive reviews without being formally flagged. It has no title on the spine, the cover is plain, the page is thin with age, and when I open it the script is in a language I recognize but rarely encounter. Old Continental Formal, the diplomatic register used for interkingdom agreements in the period before the current standard was established. I read the first page, I read it again, I carry it to the center table where the candlelight is strongest, and I read the relevant section a 3rd time carefully, making sure my translation is correct, because this is exactly the kind of text where a translation error has consequences. Come here, I say. The others gather at the table. I read aloud, translating as I go. If in one kingdom a child is born whose mind surpasses the mind of its generation, all other kingdoms are obligated to destroy that kingdom before the child comes into power. For such a person will change the world, and this world belongs to all. The archive is very quiet. The candles do not flicker. There is no draft in a room that has been sealed for 2 centuries. Tom says that's you. I close the book. I look at the cover for a moment. Blank, anonymous, shelved in the wrong section by accident or intention 200 years ago. A document that ends empires, sitting misclassified between philosophical treatises. It is an interkingdom covenant, I say. Signed by all continental powers at the time of drafting. I set my hand flat on the cover. Including the Empire of Aldrin. Including my father's throne. Lyra says it quietly with the precision of someone who has assembled the pieces, and is now reading the conclusion aloud to confirm it. Your father knew about this. Yes, he knew before you were born or shortly after. He knew the covenant existed. He knew what it required. She looks at me. He didn't send you here to study. No, I pick up the book. He sent me here because the academy is neutral ground. Because no kingdom acts against a student at the Academy of Seven Towers without violating accords that every signatory depends on for their own children. I look at the ceiling, at the candles burning in a room that has been dark for longer than anyone in this building has been alive. He sent me here to hide me while he figured out what to do. Eric from near the shelves where he has been standing listening. So what do we do now? I look at the two books under my arm. The War of Three Flags. The Unnamed Covenant. The first tells me how the coalition won last time. The second tells me why they're coming. Now I understand the rules. I say that's the first step. I move toward the door. We leave. I take these. The Academy's archive won't notice 2 missing texts among several thousand. And if it does, the restricted wing access log will show my Master of Synthesis credential, which is legitimate. I look at the others. We come back if we need to, but tonight we have what we came for. We go back through the door. Tom pulls it closed. The ward seal reactivates with the same brief pulse. In the restricted wing, in the dark between the shelves, I stand for a moment with both books held against my chest and think about my father sitting in the library with his unread book while I packed my 14 volumes for the Academy. I think about the intelligence reports getting longer each week. I think about a 5-year-old boy being sent to neutral ground because his father ran the calculation and decided that was the best available option. He wasn't wrong given what he knew. What he didn't know is what I know now. That the coalition isn't waiting to act. They already acted. They sent a troll to this corridor 2 nights ago. They have an agent in this building who knew which room to send it to. Hiding is no longer the correct strategy. I make a note of this and we go back to our rooms. Tomorrow I will write to my father. Not through the official courier system. Vorton has access to the Academy's mail review process, which I confirmed from the administrative records 3 weeks ago. Through the textile merchant in the East Market, who uses a personal cipher my grandfather established before the current diplomatic channels existed. It will take 4 days to reach the capital. I hope 4 days is enough. The honor duel declaration goes up on the board outside the main hall on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after the troll investigation closes. I see it on my way to the library. I stop. I read it. I keep walking. By the time I reach the library, I have already identified the 3 most important facts about the situation. First, an honor duel declaration cannot be refused without triggering automatic expulsion under the Academy's foundational charter. The rule dates from the institution's founding period and has never been formally revoked. Second, Ryan specified the format as open magical combat, which is the format where the gap between a 17-year-old combat specialist with 3 years of Academy training and a 5-year-old is most pronounced. Third, the winner receives a seat on the Student Council, which controls internal Academy governance, hearing rights and access to certain administrative processes that I have been trying to reach by other means for 6 weeks. Ryan chose his moment carefully. I note this. It is the first tactically intelligent thing he has done since I arrived. The problem is that he is significantly stronger than me in direct magical combat. Not slightly. Not in a way that clever footwork and good preparation can close. He has 12 years of physical development and 3 years of specialized combat training, and a magical reserve that ranks in the top 5% of Academy assessments. I have none of those things. In a straight fight I lose. I have 2 nights before the duel is scheduled. I spend the first night reading the Academy Charter, all 340 pages. It is written in old institutional metric, which is a register I'm less familiar with than the standard variety. The grammar is archaic and the sentence structures run long, but it is readable. I take notes on anything that touches the honor duel protagonist call. Page 206, Clause 17. I read it twice. Then I read the historical annotation at the bottom of the page, which is an even older script and which most readers would have skipped, because it appears to be a procedural footnote. I do not skip it. I spend the second night in the laboratory. The morning of the duel I have not slept. This is not ideal, but it is acceptable. I function adequately on 2 hours for short periods, and the calculation work is finished. The vial is ready. I put it in my kit pocket and go to the dueling hall. The hall is full. Every student in the Academy, which means 300 people on the tiered seats around the dueling floor, plus faculty along the upper rail. Honor duels are mandatory attendance events. The last one was 4 years ago. The one before that was 11 years ago. They do not happen often, which means when they do happen, everyone treats them as an occasion. Rain is already on the floor when I arrive. He is dressed for combat. Academy dueling attire. Fitted, practical, the kind that doesn't restrict movement. He looks correct for this setting. He looks like he belongs here in exactly the way the setting was designed to produce. I walk onto the floor. The hall makes the sound I have come to recognize as 300 people performing a recalibration in real time. A 5-year-old boy in standard academy uniform carrying a small kit bag, walking onto the dueling floor to face a 17-year-old combat specialist. The sound has some laughter in it. I expected this. The presiding professor, Orvain Magical Theory, the one who recognized the third-year graduation problems, reads the declaration and confirms both parties present. He asks for any preliminary statements. I raise my hand under Clause 17 of the Honor Duel Protagonist Call. I say loud enough for the room. A duelist may administer a neutralizing compound prior to the commencement of the contest. I'm exercising that right. The room reacts. Not loudly, a wave of quiet surprise. The sound of people who know the charter well enough to know the clause exists, but have never seen it applied. Ryan looks at me. That clause is for poison protection. The text reads, a duelist may administer a neutralizing compound prior to the commencement of the contest. It specifies no category of compound and no restriction on application. I look at Orvain's. Is the clause operative or not? Orvain looks at the charter copy on his lectern. He reads the clause. He reads it again. He says the clause is operative. I take the vial from my kit and drink it. The magical dispersal compound works by introducing a resonance interference field into the immediate environment. It doesn't block magical output entirely, but it reduces peak discharge capacity by approximately 40% within a 3-meter radius of the dosed individual. Ryan's combat style depends on high peak strikes. At 60% of his normal output, his strikes are still strong, but they are no longer in a different category from what I can manage with precision targeting. The gap hasn't closed, but it has narrowed to something workable. Orvain signals the start. Ryan hits fast and hard, which is what I expected. The first strike comes in high, a standard opening from his combat pattern, which I have been watching in training sessions for 2 weeks. I step left. The strike passes my right shoulder by 30 centimeters. The hall laughs a little. A child dodging. Second strike lower faster. I step back. Third strike, the one where he commits. Full extension, maximum output, designed to end it. I'm not there when it arrives. The laughter is louder now. A child running from an adult. This is what the room is seeing. I let them see it for 3 strikes because I need Rain to commit to his pattern. He fights aggressively when he believes he is in control, and he is currently fighting a 5-year-old who keeps dodging instead of responding, which reads to him as fear. He increases his output. His strikes get bigger. Bigger output means bigger fluctuation in the flow pattern, and Rain's flow pattern has a structural instability I identified on day 14, a micro-oscillation. At the point where his primary channel meets the output node, visible as a slight flicker in the discharge color at peak amplitude. Every combat mage has weak points in their pattern. Rain has never had to worry about his because no one he fights is looking for it. I start hitting back. Not hard, small, precise, targeted. Each strike going into the oscillation point at the exact moment of maximum instability. The first one staggers him slightly. He thinks it's a lucky shot. The second one hits the same point. His pattern shifts, trying to compensate. The compensation creates new instability. The third strike finds the new point. Rain increases output again. More power trying to overwhelm, but more power through an unstable channel means more oscillation, which means more points, which means I have more targets. He is solving his problem by making it worse, and he doesn't know it yet. Minute 11. His strikes are coming less cleanly. The flicker in his discharge color is visible to anyone watching closely now, though I suspect most of the room doesn't know what it means. Minute 14. The oscillation hits a threshold. The channel can't contain the output at current amplitude, the instability cascades backward through the flow path, and the discharge reverses direction for a fraction of a second, redirecting into Ryan's own system. He goes down, not dramatically. He simply stops being able to stand, his legs stop working, and he sits down hard on the dueling floor. And then he is on his back. And his output has gone to 0, because his system is running a reflexive shutdown to protect itself from the backflow damage. The hall is completely silent. I walk over to him. I stand at the appropriate distance, close enough for conversation, not so close as to be aggressive about it. He is looking up at the ceiling with the expression of someone who has just experienced something their understanding of themselves did not include. You use the compound, he says. His voice is steady. I credit him for that. That's not a fair fight. The charter permitted the compound. I used it. I look at him. Your dean has worked at this academy for 20 years. He signed the charter. He did not read Clause 17 carefully enough to anticipate this application. You have studied here for 3 years. You declared a duel governed by rules you did not fully read. I wait 1 beat. I'm 5 years old and I read 340 pages of old institutional metric in 2 nights, specifically for this conversation. I look at the hall then back at him. The information was available to everyone. I used it. That is what reading is for. The hall is quiet for 2 seconds. Then someone laughs. Not the mean laughter from before. Different. The laughter of recognition. Of 300 people simultaneously understanding that they have watched something they are going to remember. It spreads. Rain gets up from the floor alone. He does not ask for help and no one offers it. His face is composed. He walks off the floor without looking at me. Whatever he is going to do next, he has decided not to do it here. In the upper seats, Ryan's 2 closest companions from the Varian contingent watch him leave the floor. They exchange a look. One of them pulls out a small folded paper, not Academy correspondence, the size and fold of a private message, and holds it in his closed fist without opening it. He waits until the hall begins to empty, then he unfolds it, reads it once, and puts it away. He does not speak. He does not look toward the floor, where the 5-year-old is accepting Orvain's formal confirmation of the result. He looks toward the window, then he gets up and leaves by the upper exit. I'm putting my kid away when Lyra reaches me. The hall is still mostly full, people leaving slowly talking. She falls into step and keeps her voice low. You've been preparing for this since before he declared it, she says. Since day 10, she looks at me. Day 10, you identified that he would declare a duel on day 10. I identified that he would eventually look for a formal mechanism to address what he perceives as a status problem. The honor duel is the only formal mechanism available to a student of his standing. After the tournament, after the ranking results, it was the logical next step. Day 10 was when I assessed the probability as high enough to warrant preparation. And if he hadn't declared it, then I would have 2 nights of charter reading and 1 unnecessary potion and no particular loss. I close my kid. The preparation cost was low. The value if he did declare was high. The calculation was straightforward. Lyra is quiet for a moment. Then you've been doing this the whole time. Every move, the tournament, Eric, Tom, the archive, it's all connected to something you're working toward. Yes, and you still haven't told me what it is. I look at her. She has been patient with this answer for longer than most people would be, which is relevant information about her. I say soon. There are things moving faster than I expected, and I'm going to need you to know. She holds my gaze for a moment, nods once, walks away. I watch her go. Then I look at the dueling floor empty now, the candles being snuffed by the hall staff, the last students filing out. The student council seat is mine as of this afternoon. I have access I didn't have this morning. We are going to knight it. Tom brings it to me at midnight, 4 days after the duel. He doesn't knock. He opens the door the way he does when something can't wait, quickly and without the usual pause. He has a folded paper in his hand. He sets it on my desk without saying anything and steps back. I read it. It is a fragment, not a complete message. Tom intercepted it from the west corridor during one of Vorton's midnight meetings, close enough to the service door to catch a few sentences before the contact moved away. The handwriting is not Vorton's. The language is Coalition diplomatic shorthand, which is a register I recognize from a trade correspondence manual in the lower archive. I translated in approximately 40 seconds. Coalition advance forces crossed the Grey Pass 6 days ago. Imperial Northern Corps engaged. First engagement concluded. Imperial loss is significant. Campaign is open. I fold the paper. I stand up. I take my kit bag from under the bed and begin putting things in it. The 2 books from the Founder's Archive. My notebook. The Alchemy Kit. The remaining dissolution compound. Lyra is in the doorway. She followed Tom. They do this now. When Tom moves quickly, she follows. Because experience has taught her that Tom moving quickly means something requires attention. Where are you going, she says. Tom, she looks at the bag. The Academy won't release you without formal application and a 7-day processing period. Vorton controls the release authorizations. I know, you're not applying. No, she is quiet for a moment. The specific quiet of a person working through the implications of a statement they already understand. The dissolution compound, she says. There's enough left for 1 more dose. Enough to get through the outer wall. I check the vial. I go tonight. Alone, Tom from behind her. The horse is already arranged. Farmer 3 miles east of the Academy. Name of Durans. I paid him 3 silver to keep it ready. Been keeping it ready for 2 weeks. I look at him. He shrugs. You sent a letter through a textile merchant using a family cipher. I figured there was a chance you'd need to move fast at some point. I look at him for a moment longer. Then I close my bag. Tell Lyra and Eric what you know when I'm gone. Not before. I don't want Vorton alerted before I'm past the wall. And when the Academy notices you're missing, they'll notice at morning assembly. I'll be 8 hours ahead by then. I put on my traveling coat. Keep watching the West Corridor. Keep notes, I'll need them when I come back. Tom nods. He steps aside. Lyra does not step aside. She looks at me with the expression she uses when she has an objection she is deciding whether or not to make. Come back, she says. It is not a request. It is a statement of expectation, which is how Lyra Ashvin expresses things she considers non-negotiable. Yes, I say I go. The outer wall of the Academy is 6 meters of old stone construction, warded on the interior face, but not the exterior. The wards were designed to keep threats out, not students in. This is again a failure of imagination. I noted it on day 3. I take the dissolution dose at the base of the wall on the north side, where the guard's rotation leaves a 4-minute gap between passes. I wait for the compound to set. Then I walk through the wall. The stone is different from the table and different from the archive wall. Older, denser, the sensation of moving through something that has been in one place for 2 centuries and has opinions about being walked through. It takes 6 seconds, then I am outside the Academy wall in the pre-dawn dark, and the dissolution effect is already fading, and 50 meters ahead of me is the North Road. Duran's farm is 3 miles east. The horse is there, a brown working animal, not fast but steady. Duran is asleep. I leave a note with the Academy seal pressed into the wax, explaining that the horse is on loan to the Imperial family and will be returned. This is not exactly true, but it is close enough, and it is better than Noah. 3 days on the road, I sleep 4 hours each night, enough to function. I think through the War of Three Flags document while I ride, the specific sequence of the Coalition's previous campaign, the timing, the agents-in-place strategy, the 3-week delay they manufactured before the previous empire could respond. They used the same geography then. Grey Pass is the only route through the northern range that supports a supply line. They used it 200 years ago. They used it again. My father did not read the War of Three Flags. His generals did not read the War of Three Flags. Nobody read the War of Three Flags because it was in the Founders. Archived behind a magically sealed door in a restricted library section, and the only person who had recently gone through the wall and taken the document was me. I ride faster on the 3rd day. The capital's outer districts come into view in the early morning of the 4th day, and I know before I reach the gates that it is worse than I calculated. The western quarter is not damaged. It is gone. The skyline I memorized from my father's tower window, the warehouse rooflines, the mill structure, the river bridge, has gaps in it that means stone has been reduced to rubble, not just burned. At the palace gates there are soldiers, more than there should be. And half of them are in field bandaging, arms and slings, makeshift wrappings on legs, the systematic damage of people who were in a fight recently and have not fully stopped being in it yet. I count 47 injured visible from the gate approach. I stop counting because the number is not the relevant information. The relevant information is that they are here at the gates, which means the front is close enough that the palace is receiving overflow. The gate captain recognizes the imperial seal on my bag. He looks at me 5 years old alone, on a farm horse with a traveling coat and a kit bag, and does something between a bow and the expression of a man who has had a confusing several days. And this is the latest development. He opens the gates. My father is in the throne room. He is not sitting on the throne. He is at the strategy table, which has been moved to the center of the room, with 4 generals and 2 advisors around it. Maps, reports, markers indicating troop positions. He looks up when I come through the doors. He looks at me for a long time. The expression moves through several things quickly. Relief, something complicated. I don't have a word for it. And then the controlled reassembly of a person who is in the middle of a war and cannot afford to stop being in the middle of a war. I sent you there to protect you, he says. I know. I walk to the table. I set the War of Three Flags document on it. I found the Covenant in the Founders' archive. And this, you didn't read it. He looks at the document. He knows what it is. Kai, how many did we lose? A pause, then first engagement. Approximately 1/3 of the Northern Corps. The coalition came through the Grey Pass. We weren't positioned for that approach. I look at the maps. The Grey Pass entry point is marked with a red indicator. Post-battle assessment. Added after the fact. I look at where the Imperial defensive positions were set, which is the Mountain Road approach, which is where any general would position them if they hadn't read what I read. The Grey Pass is their standard opening move, I say. The War of Three Flags, Chapter 2, page 41. Every time the coalition of these three kingdoms has run a unified campaign, they open through the Grey Pass, because it gives them supply line access to the northern plains within 72 hours of crossing. The previous empire set their defense on the mountain road and lost the first engagement for the same reason. I look at my father. This document has been in your academy's archive for 200 years. The room is quiet. From the far end of the table, General Korn, the man with the Northern Corps designation on his uniform, the most senior military officer in the room, turns to look at me. He is 60 years old, and he has the bearing of a man who has been the most experienced person in most rooms for a long time. Your Majesty, he says, with a careful tone of a man choosing words for their effect. A child does not belong in a war council. I do not turn to look at him. I keep my eyes on the map. General Korn, I say, you lost 1/3 of the Northern Corps in the first engagement because you didn't anticipate a tactical approach that has been documented in a historical record for 200 years. I'm 5 years old. I read the records. I look up from the map. I am open to a discussion about who currently belongs in this room and who should perhaps spend the next hour reading before they speak again. I'd suggest we start that discussion with you. The room is completely still. I look at my father. He looks at Korn, then at me, then at the map. Then he does the thing he does when he has made a decision he is going to commit to completely. He nods. Talk, he says. In the corridor outside the throne room, 2 of Korn's staff officers stand waiting for the council to finish. One of them heard the exchange through the partially opened door. He looks at the other one. The other one looks at the door. Neither of them says anything for a moment. How old is he? The first one says. 5, says the second. Another silence. Right, says the first one. He straightens his uniform and looks at the ceiling inside the throne room. A 5-year-old stands at the strategy table and begins to talk. I sleep for 3 hours after the council session. This is not enough, but it is what is available. There is too much to do and the timeline does not accommodate more. I wake up at 4 in the morning, sit at the desk in the room they gave me, and write out the full plan and sequence. Not for my father yet, for myself first. I think better when the structure is on paper. 3 steps. Each one depends on the one before it. Step 1 is the hospital. The palace medical wing is in the east corridor. Ground floor extended into the old banquet hall because the normal capacity ran out 4 days ago. I count beds as I walk through. 312. The palace surgeon, a man named Aldrich, who has been working continuously since the northern engagement and looks like a person who has made peace with the concept of sleep as a theoretical construct, meets me at the entrance. He looks at me. He looks at the room. He says, Your Highness, the Emperor said to give you access. I will be honest. I don't know what you're expecting to. I'll start at the far end and work forward. I say worst cases first. He looks at me for a moment longer, then he steps aside. The worst cases are at the back, the ones who took direct magical strike damage, internal disruption to the body's natural energy channels. These take the longest because the regeneration work requires mapping each individual's channel structure before beginning, and no 2 are identical. The first night takes 4 hours. I sit beside him and work through it systematically, find the disruption points, initiate the regeneration sequence, hold the process stable while the tissue rebuilds. It is not unlike brewing. You set the conditions and then you maintain them until the reaction completes. He wakes up when I finish. He looks at his hands. He looks at me. He says nothing, which is the correct response from someone whose body has just been substantially repaired by a 5-year-old. The second night takes 3 hours. The third 2.5. The process becomes more efficient as I refine the approach. Each case teaches me something about the variation in channel structures that makes the next case faster. By the end of the first day, I have treated 11 nights. By midday of the second day, the count is 43. By evening 80s. I'm sitting on the floor of the hospital wing at the end of the second day, my back against the wall between 2 beds, eating something one of the nurses brought me when General Korn walks in. He stands in the middle of the ward and looks at the 80 men who were bedridden this morning and are now sitting up, eating, testing their movement. He looks at this for a while. His expression is not one I can read from this angle. The palace surgeon Aldrich appears at Korn's shoulder. He says very quietly, something I can hear because the ward has gone mostly still. I've been a physician for 30 years. What he's been doing for the past 2 days is not possible. I look up from my food. It's rare, I say. Not impossible. The distinction matters. Korn looks at me. Something in his face has shifted since the throne room, though he would not say so and I would not require him to. He looks at the ward again, then he nods once, to no one in particular, and walks out. I finish eating and go back to work. Step 2 requires the Imperial Alchemists. There are 6 of them stationed in the palace laboratory. Competent practitioners, all of them trained in the standard imperial curriculum, which means they have never seen the War of Three Flags enhancement compound, because it is in a document that was locked in the Founders' archive for 200 years. I bring them together on the morning of the 3rd day and put the recipe on the table. The senior alchemist, a woman named Surin, who has been working for the Imperial House for 20 years, reads it with the careful attention of someone who knows enough to know what they are looking at. This is from the historical period, she says. Yes, pre-standard era. The compound was theorized during the coalition conflict 2 centuries ago, but never successfully produced. The historical record notes that every attempt failed. I look at the recipe. The failure point is the introduction sequence. They were using standard order. This compound requires inverted sequence, reagents 7 through 1, not 1 through 7. The molecular interaction pathway is reversed from normal synthesis. That's why no one could brew it. The instructions don't specify the inversion because in the original script, the directional notation is indicated by a grammatical register that was only used in that period and was never translated into standard documentation. Sarin looks at the text. She is reading it again, checking my translation of the register. You read this script? Yes. So I found a grammatical reference text in the archive. It took about a week. I look at the group. I'll brew the first batch. Watch the sequence. Then I'll need you to produce 200 doses in the next 3 days. They watch. I brew. The compound takes 4 hours at the correct sequence. The result is a clear amber liquid, lighter in color than the standard enhancement potions they know, with a faint luminescence at the surface. I administer a test dose to a volunteer knight, one of the 80 I restored yesterday, who offered when I explained what was needed. The effect is measurable within 8 minutes. Speed assessment. Movement rate increases by a factor of approximately 2. Pain response. Significantly elevated threshold. Magical reserve recovery. I measure it at 3 times the standard rate over a 30-minute observation period. Duration 6 hours from administration. After effect, the volunteer knight sits down heavily at the 7-hour mark and sleeps for 14 hours. When he wakes up, he is completely functional, but the 14 hours are lost. I write this down precisely. 200 doses, 6-hour window, 1 shot at a decisive engagement. After that, 24 hours of vulnerability in every soldier who took the compound. Sarin has already begun organizing the production run. She works the way good people work when they understand the importance of what they are doing. Without commentary, without wasted motion, I go find my father. The strategy session is in the map room, which is smaller than the throne room and better suited to the kind of conversation I need to have. My father is there with Korn and 2 other senior generals. The map shows the current positions. Coalition forces in the northern corridor. Imperial line holding at the river junction. The Grey Pass already secured behind the coalition advance. I stand at the table. They're expecting us to hold the river line, I say. Every campaign assessment they've run on my father's strategic approach over the past decade reads him as cautious and defensive. He consolidates, he holds, he waits for the enemy to overextend. That's the correct read based on available evidence. I look at the maps. So they're planning 2 more engagements, one to break the river line, one to push through to the capital. They have the manpower for it. If we fight the war they're expecting us to fight, we lose in approximately 40 days. The room is quiet. My father is listening. Zal, I say. I put my finger on the smallest of the 3 coalition territories on the map. They joined the coalition last. Trade agreements with the Empire going back 60 years. Grain contracts. Textile exchange. 3 river port arrangements that were mutually profitable until Veyr and Dorn recruited them into this. Zal's king did not want this war. He was pressured into it. I look at the maps. They committed 12,000 soldiers to the coalition force. They are positioned on the eastern flank, the least critical position, because Veyr and Dorn don't fully trust them and put them where the pressure is lowest. Korn, and you want to hit the flanks. I want to destroy the flank fast, 3 days maximum, and then offer Zal a separate peace on terms that are better than anything they had before. Their king wants out. Give him an exit that saves his face and he'll take it. I look at Korn's. When Zal withdraws, Veyr and Dorn don't immediately advance. I know this because they never have. In every historical coalition campaign involving these 3 kingdoms, when one partner exits, the other 2 pause to regroup and recalculate. The pattern holds in the War of Three Flags and in the 2 smaller conflicts in the century before that. Military patterns from 2 centuries ago aren't. They haven't changed their doctrine, I say. The same strategic manual is taught in the military academies of Veyr and Dorn today that was used 200 years ago. I read it. It was in the restricted archive. The doctrine on coalition disintegration response is in Chapter 9. When a coalition partner withdraws, remaining forces consolidate before resuming offensive operations. Minimum consolidation period 12 days. I look at the map 12 days. With 200 doses of enhancement compound and 80 restored knights in the field, plus the river line holding as a rear anchor, that is enough time to reposition and prepare a second engagement from a stronger position. Korn opens his mouth, closes it. My father says how long to produce the compound. 3 days. Saren is already running it. And the risk if we commit to the Zhao offensive and they don't withdraw. They will withdraw if we offer the right terms. The terms need to arrive before we engage. Not after. They need to know the exit is available before the fight starts, so their king can make the decision without it looking like surrender. I look at my father. Send a trade envoy, not a military messenger. A trade envoy carrying a grain contract proposal. Standard commercial language. Vorton, your dean at the academy, who is Vare's contact inside your own institution, won't know how to read a grain contract negotiation as a peace overture. By the time anyone understands what the message is, Zal will have already received it. The room is quiet for a long time. My father looks at the map. He looks at me. He asks the question I have been waiting for since I walked into this room. How old are you? 5, I say. But the War of Three Flags was written 200 years ago. The age of the author didn't affect the accuracy of the information. Neither does mine. General Korn stands at the map table after the council clears. The others have gone to begin implementation. Sarin for the compound production. The communications office for the trade envoy draft. The field commanders for redeployment orders. He is alone with the map. He looks at the gray pass marker. Red post-battle. Added after the fact. He looks at the river lines. He looks at the Zhao position on the eastern flank. He has been a general for 31 years. He has sat in war councils with kings and ministers and the most experienced military commanders in the empire. He picks up the War of Three Flags document from the table. He opens it to Chapter 2, page 41, where the Gray Pass entry is described in the specific operational detail that would have repositioned the Northern Corps if anyone had read it 3 weeks ago. He reads the page. He sets the document down. He does not say anything. He picks up his papers and walks out. The letters go out 4 days before we move. Tom's letter first. A short message through the Academy's scholarship correspondence system, which Vorton doesn't review because scholarship students receive administrative notices, not political communications. The message reads like a library request. Tom will understand it. He reads things correctly. Lyra's letter through the ducal post, which routes through her father's household before reaching the Academy. 4 days is enough time if the couriers are fast. I write it in the trade cipher my grandfather used. She doesn't know the cipher, but she will recognize that the letter isn't standard correspondence, and will hold it until I explain. Eric doesn't need a letter. He needs to be where I can use him. The Academy will release a scholarship student on imperial requisition for the duration of an active military campaign. This is an obscure provision in the educational charter that has never been used before. I file the paperwork with my father's seal. Tom arrives on the 3rd day. He walks into the strategy room with his kit bag over his shoulder and looks at the maps on the wall with the expression of someone who has spent 6 weeks watching a western corridor at midnight and is ready for a different kind of work. The eastern flank, I say. Zal's supply line runs from their rear base to the front position through the Aran Valley. 3 resupply points. I need to know which one has the lightest guard rotation. He looks at the map for 30 seconds. How long do I have? 20 hours. I'll need a horse and something that looks like a farmer's cart. Both are arranged. He leaves before noon. Eric arrives on the 4th day, escorted from the academy by an imperial courier who looks slightly uncertain about the nature of the assignment. Eric looks at the military camp outside the palace, at the soldiers, at the formations being drilled in the east yard. He looks at me. Where do you need me? He says, this is why I chose Eric for this. The battle plan is simple because the best plans are 200 enhanced knights, strike the Zal eastern flank at the 2nd resupply point. The one Tom confirmed has a rotation gap between midnight and the 2nd hour. The Northern Corps restored holds the river line and demonstrates forward pressure to keep Vare and Dorn's attention on the center. The enhancement compound goes to the strike force only because 200 doses applied to the decisive point is more effective than the same doses spread across the whole line. My father leads the strike force. This is non-negotiable for him and I accept it. An emperor at the front of a precision strike has a value in morale and command authority that outweighs the risk. and I have calculated the risk to be manageable given the intelligence Tom brings back. Tom brings back excellent intelligence. The third resupply point has 12 guards. The second has 4, because 2 of the rotation were pulled to reinforce a perceived threat on the northern approach. A perceived threat that the Northern Corps created deliberately by running a loud patrol exercise at sunset. 4 guards, a 6-hour compound window, and a strike force of 200 enhanced knights. I am at the field command post with the communication runners. Not in the fight, in the calculation. Corrections go forward through the runners every 20 minutes. Adjust left flank by 200 meters. Bring the rear element forward when the supply building is breached. Hold the eastern perimeter until Tom confirms the road exit is clear. My father follows each one exactly. He has stopped asking me to justify the adjustments. We reached that point somewhere in the second day of the strategy sessions, and I did not comment on it. Eric is with the strike force's magical support element. His job is containment, keeping the enhancement field stable in the strike zone, suppressing any counter magic from Zal's battle mages, and on my signal, delivering a single full reserve discharge to the supply depot to end the engagement decisively. I give him the signal at the 1 hour 40-minute mark. The discharge is visible from the command post. It is also as Eric's full discharges tend to be significantly larger than specified. The supply depot does not partially collapse. It ceases to exist as a coherent structure. The eastern flank breaks in the early morning of the second day. Zal's commander sends a rider to our position at the 7th hour. Request for terms. The ambassador from Zal is a careful man. Middle-aged, well-dressed, the bearing of someone who has done this before and understands the protagonist call. He sits across the table from me in the forward command tent, with my father at my right and General Korn at my left. And he opens with the standard coalition framing, a misunderstanding, shared interests, a desire for peaceful resolution. I let him finish. Zal joined the coalition under pressure from where 18 months ago, I say. Your king's trade contracts with the Empire predate the coalition by 60 years. The grain routes through the Aran Valley generate approximately 40% of Zal's annual revenue. You have been fighting a war that damages the trading relationship your economy depends on. I look at the papers in front of me. Here are the terms. Zal withdraws from the coalition completely. Zal reopens the trade routes as of the date of signing. Zal provides the Empire with whatever operational intelligence it holds on Ver and Dorn's campaign plans. I push the document forward. In exchange, the grain contracts are renewed at 15% above the previous rate, and the riverport agreements are expanded to include 2 additional docking facilities. The ambassador reads the document. He reads it again. You're asking us to provide intelligence on our coalition partners, he says. That is, you are accepting a better arrangement than the one you had before the war, I say. Your coalition partners sent your forces to the least critical position on the flank because they didn't trust you. They were right not to trust you. You had better reasons to maintain a relationship with us than to fight us. You knew it. They knew it. This document acknowledges the reality of the situation and provides your king with a formal mechanism to exit gracefully. I look at him. The word for this is trade, not betrayal. The difference matters if you need to explain it to yourself later. The ambassador looks at the document for a long time. He signs it the following morning. Verendorn stop advancing 48 hours after Zal's withdrawal becomes known. Exactly as the War of Three Flags predicted. Exactly the 12-day consolidation window I told the council to expect. The Imperial Army uses 11 of those 12 days to reposition, resupply, and redeploy the restored Northern Corps to a forward position that the coalition's original campaign plan had not accounted for. Ver's economy begins failing at the 6-week mark. The trade route blockade I proposed in the strategy session, cutting the eastern river access, that Ver's grain imports depend on using the river junction, the Imperial line already produces results faster than I projected. By week 8, Ver's king sends a delegation. The terms are less favorable to them than Zal's were. This is intentional. Being second costs more. Dorn surrenders at the 10-week mark. Having run the calculation, and concluded that continuing without Ver's full support against an Imperial force that now holds the strategic high ground is not a survivable option. 3 Kingdoms, 1 campaign, 10 weeks from the day I arrived at the capital on a farm horse. I write this in my notebook on the day Dorn's surrender is confirmed. Then I close the notebook and go find my father. The Victory Council is formal, full military staff, advisors, documents to sign, the administrative structure of ending a war properly. I sit through it. When it concludes, when the last general has left and the last document has been sealed, Korn pauses at the door. He turns back. He looks at me. He clears his throat. His Highness, he says, demonstrated capabilities that exceeded. He stops, tries again. The campaign outcome reflects abilities that were remarkable. I look at him. General Korn, I say. In the past 3 weeks you said the word impossible 3 times, once about the hospital ward, once about the compound production timeline, once about the Zhao withdrawal prediction. I look at him directly. I would like to suggest replacing that word in your operational vocabulary with I don't currently know how. It is more accurate, and it leaves room for updating your assessment when new information arrives. Korn looks at me for a moment. His expression is the expression of a man swallowing something that does not go down easily. Noted, he says. He leaves. My father is at the window. I hear him make a sound that he converts into a cough before it fully becomes a laugh. I note this and say nothing about it. Evening, the map room cleared. Just the two of us. My father says you could have died. The troll 3 days alone on a road. The battle, yes. I say, but if I had stayed at the academy, you would have lost the war. The probability was high enough to justify the risk. He is quiet. Are you angry, he says, that I sent you there to hide you? I think about this honestly. It takes a moment. Not because the answer is complicated, but because I want to give him the accurate answer, rather than the easy one. No, I say. You didn't know what I could do yet. You were protecting what you had with the information available to you. That's the correct decision process. I look at the window. The problem was the information, not the decision. He is quiet for a long time then and now. Now you know what you have. I look at him. Don't hide it next time. Use it. He looks at me, his 5-year-old son, standing in the map room of a palace that is still repairing its western quarter at the end of a 10-week war, telling him how to run his empire. He looks at me for a long time. Then he puts his hand on top of my head, very briefly, the way he used to when I was small enough that he could do this without crouching. I'm still small enough. He hasn't done it in a while. He goes to bed. I stay up for 2 more hours finishing my notes on the campaign. There are things I want to document while the details are current. In the War Council archive, 3 weeks after the campaign ends, General Korn requisitions a copy of the War of 3 Flags from the Imperial Library. The librarian notes the request in the acquisition log. It is the first time the text has been formally requisitioned by a military officer in the archive's records. Korn takes it to his office. He reads the full document over 2 evenings. He makes notes in the margins. Careful notes in the precise handwriting of a man who takes seriously the things he decides to take seriously. The note on page 41 beside the gray pass entry. Should have read this. He underlines it once. The academy is different when I return. The main gate looks the same. Same ironwork. Same stone arch. The courtyard is the same. But Vorton is not at the door because Vorton is in an imperial holding facility, waiting for a formal hearing on charges that include conspiracy, transmission of military intelligence to a foreign power, and coordination with the controlled creature attack on academy grounds. The case is straightforward. I gave the evidence to my father's investigators before the campaign started. They confirmed it during the Zhao intelligence handover. The temporary dean, a woman named Professor Sarah, brought in from the northern branch of the academy, meets me at the entrance. She shakes my hand, which is a slightly awkward action given the height differential, and says she has arranged for my coursework to be credited for the period of my absence. I thank her and go to find the others. They are in the east corridor. All 3 of them, which means Tom had advance notice I was coming. He always has advance notice of things. It is one of the most consistently useful things about him. Lyra, you didn't send word. There wasn't time. There was time you chose not to. This is accurate. Yes. Tom's, how did it go? The war. It's over. He nods. He looks at me with the expression he uses when he is processing something that he is going to have questions about later, but is choosing not to ask right now. This is also one of the useful things about him. Eric is standing slightly back from the other 2. He looks at me. He doesn't say anything. Then he reaches forward and puts his hand on my shoulder, one large hand placed carefully, the controlled contact of a person who has spent a year learning to be precise about his strength. He holds it there for a moment. I look at his hand. I leave it where it is. The graduation ceremony is a year later. I'm 6 years old, which makes me the youngest student to complete the academy's full senior curriculum in its 230-year history. The presiding faculty notes this in the ceremonial record, with a specific phrasing of people who are not quite sure how to present the fact, without it sounding like something they made up. Lyra is first in the academic ranking. This is formally correct. I did not sit the final magical theory examination because I was conducting a military campaign at the time it was scheduled, and the Academy's grading system does not have a provision for crediting wars as equivalent. She is first. She has earned it. I find her after the ceremony in the courtyard where the reception is being held. Congratulations on first place, I say. She looks at me. It doesn't count. You weren't there for the final exam. You would have been first regardless. Your magical theory work this year was better than anything I could have produced in that format. She looks at me for a moment, checking whether I mean it. I mean it. You sat a different exam, she says. Yes, a pause. Then something happens on Lyra Ashbin's face that I have not seen before in the full year I have known her. It is not large. It does not rearrange her features or change her posture. It is a small shift at the corners of her mouth, present for approximately 3 seconds, gone before anyone looking from a distance would have caught it. She smiles. Then she turns and goes back to the reception, because she has people to speak to, and she is always exactly as long as she needs to be in any given place and not a moment more. I walk out through the academy's main gate at the end of the ceremony. The road runs north toward the capital. The trees along it are the same trees I rode past a year ago on a farm horse with a kit bag and a stolen document. I stop at the gate and look at the road for a moment. The covenant says if a prodigy is born, destroy the kingdom before the child comes into power. For such a person will change the world, and this world belongs to all. They thought that was a warning. They were right, but the direction of the change is mine to choose, not theirs to prevent. It always was. I pick up my bag and start walking. There's a great deal of work still to do.